most of what happened. You can read the details of it. I want to take a couple of passages and actually take the time to go through a couple of passages in the 21st and 22nd chapters, because there's, realistically, I get 4 sermons out of this that I'm going to try to condense into a half-hour, 40-minute lesson discussion. But there's some very significant things to be taken from this. All this time, Abram and Abraham have been waiting on the birth of his son by Sarah. Tried having a kid by Hagar. God tells Abram, this is not the child that's going of promise. Sarah's going to have a kid. I know you've been trying for however many years to have a kid with her, and it hasn't been successful, but Sarah's going to have a kid. And since the 11th or 12th chapter up to the 20th chapter, the 21st chapter, we've been waiting for this to happen, and finally it comes. In the first verse of the 21st chapter, it says, the Lord kept his word and did for Sarah exactly what he had promised. She became pregnant, and she gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age. This happened at just the time God had said it would. And Abraham named their son Isaac. 8 days after Isaac was born, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded. And Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. He was 75 when the whole process began, when he left home. So 25 years after the beginning of this journey, Isaac is born to Sarah. You think back about all that we've discussed, and I'm not going to recap all of it right now, but the entire process, the entire journey that Abraham and Sarah have been on, and then you have the birth of this miracle child. It's easy to say that Isaac was a miracle. We get that. They've been trying for 25 years to have a kid. All of a sudden, this kid is born to a man who is 100 and to a woman that's 90 years old. I want to make sure that everybody processes that in their mind before we move forward. Born to a 90-year-old woman. Most of the time we talk about the miracle of Isaac and his birth. I want to look at Sarah just for a second so we don't gloss over this, because there's a lot to be gleaned from this. Sarah was a miracle in and of herself that sometimes we overlook. Either by anecdote or by experience, take a minute to think about the physical rigors of carrying a child to term. Some of us have more experience with that than others, but think about what your body went through as you go through hormonal changes, as you carry this 5-pound weight, 8-pound weight, 10-pound weight, day in, day out, having to get up, having to navigate. What that was like, if you can take your minds back, if you can remember, or if you've heard stories and remember getting fussed at, and remember the crankiness that you had to endure during that time period, how complicated it was, and what it looked like having to go through that. Take and just remember what that looked like and felt like. And then consider the fact that most women who go through this, and most of us are, a quarter of Sarah's age, 90 years old. 30 years old, that's tough. 20 years old is tough. 90? What that had to have been like, what that had to have felt like. And bear in mind that there was no advanced medicine, no prenatal vitamins, no prenatal exercise programs. And when she came time to give birth, no epidurals. Everything. She felt everything she experienced. While this would have been a challenge for any woman at, we'll say, age 65, which was how old she was when the whole process began, it would have been hard enough at 65. One can certainly reasonably assume that it would have been easier than at age 90. It's been 25 years. If he was going to have me get pregnant, why not have me get pregnant at 65 while I was moving around a little bit better? I mean, I know that I'm a little bit more agile than I was 25 years ago, or a little bit less agile. A little bit stronger, a little bit less agile, but the body, you go through stuff, things change. Why couldn't this have happened 25 years ago? It would have been a little bit easier. Yet nowhere in the Bible is it written that miracles come easily. Nor is the path to glory typically found through lands of convenience. Some might theorize that God suspended the effects of time on Sarah's body, although by her testimony in Abraham's record there was no evidence of such. now that I think about it a little bit more, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what kind of condition Sarah was in, because at 90 years old, she looked good enough that this man saw her and wanted to pay good money to have her, to take her as his wife. So maybe God says, spends time, we don't, 90-year-old now might not have looked like 90-year-old then, but what it had to have felt like, because she only lived to be 125, 127, I say only just in the scope of how long people live. So she was more than 3/4 of her way through her life. If you want to adjust it for how long she lived, maybe she's 70, 65 years old realistically on our living scale. But still, she must have looked like something if this man was willing to pay all this money, but maybe God suspended time in Sarah. I want you to understand, how did this whole thing work, to consider what God did for this woman. Others could theorize that God reversed the effects of aging on Sarah's inner workings, while it's also possible that she was imbued with divine strength and protection to endure this process. I'd suggest that a miracle of this magnitude could require all the above. How did a 90-year-old woman manage to have a child? God had to, it was a supernatural feat that we shouldn't overlook. Sarah became a walking, talking, breathing miracle in her own right. That something as taxing, as challenging, as psychologically demanding as carrying a child to term, she got strength from somewhere. She had to have been empowered by something to be able to endure that process, and how great God has to be able to turn back or suspend the effects of time on people to still be able to bless them and work miracles in their life. How great it is, how great of a thing it is to see God defying the laws of nature, defying the laws of physics, to work on a person's behalf because they are destined to be a part of a promise. What's more relevant than how God worked is the idea that just because something has not been useful in the past does not mean that it is not without purpose. Consider that one of the things that we take from the birth and the miracle of Isaac and the miracle that God works in Sarah's life is just because she had been useless before did not mean that she was devoid of purpose. Just because she had been unsuccessful, and when I say useless, I mean from a Hebraic perspective. If you couldn't give birth to a baby, you might as well get a housemaid. The fact that she was not able to fulfill her social purpose, the fact that she had to carry shame for 25 years, the fact that she was socially deemed useless did not mean that she was not without purpose. That which is disposable to man is oftentimes fertile ground for God's miracles. Here God takes the dead womb of a useless woman and creates life both in the womb of Sarah and in the person of Isaac. You see the creative power of God working where her womb was barren and dead and couldn't do anything. And she, by extension, wasn't good for much of anything. God breathes life into her and allows her to be a vessel for the creation of something that's going to change all of humanity. If ever there was such thing as a high-risk pregnancy in all prenatal history, it would have been hers. And in this, we see the sustaining power of God demonstrated in a way that had been previously unknown. We're talking about getting to know God when we don't have these stories. How in the world did this child manage to survive this pregnancy? How did this woman survive this childbirth? It's because God imbued them with sustaining, miraculous power, put his hands of protection around them because she had purpose in her life. And when you have purpose, when you are part of a promise, age is irrelevant. Time is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is what God has declared is going to be. And so there is no such thing as too old to be useful to God or too old for God to be glorified out of your life. There's no such thing as too much time has passed for me to be great in the kingdom of God, or too many things have gone wrong, or there's no such thing as that in God. And we find in Sarah that this unlikely miracle, a vessel for a miracle. And we talked about this before. You know, you write these stories and you're listening to these stories, and if you had to pick somebody to be a mother of a great nation, it wouldn't be the barren woman who for 25 years hadn't given birth to a child. At some point, somebody would have said they must have misunderstood God. At some point, somebody might have thought, well, maybe it wasn't God, maybe it's just what I wanted, and because what I wanted, I thought it was God. but she had been promised something. And so in spite of how much time had passed, and in spite of what had gone on, God sustained her. I'm reminded of a passage in Joshua in the book of Joshua, after Caleb has become an old man and they've gone through the process of conquest. And Caleb is 80 years old, and he said, the Bible says he's old, and so when the Bible says you old, you old. And Caleb says, I was 21 when I saw this place, I'm 80 now, but I've got just as much strength in me now as I did back then. Now give me that which was promised to me. Give me my mountain. The effects of time. God is God over time. And so there's never a situation where so much has gone wrong and so many things have passed that you have forfeited your purpose. Just because people have declared and said or called you useless and said that if you were going to be something, you would have been something by now. Just because you've been written off or dismissed does not mean that you are without purpose. And when the fullness of time comes, the miracle comes along with it. And this is, with the promise of God comes the power to walk according to that purpose. Sarah learned that in God she was stronger than she had been for decades. And this is, I want you to understand, this isn't some inspirational anecdote or some fairy tale. It should inform what we see in ourselves when we look in the mirror. I don't know if they had mirrors back then. I have to check the archaeology. You know, I got issues, so I actually have to be precise and make sure I knew what I was talking about before I said it. But if we looked in the mirror, some people look in the mirror and see a history full of failure, rejection, uselessness. The enemy would have us believe that we are who we have been or who others have said we are. If we weren't who everybody else has said we were, then we wouldn't be where we are today, or so goes the reasoning. Yet we have a legacy on record that clearly demonstrates God does wonderful things with broken people. I want you to know, we've talked about it before, but I don't think it can be said enough. God does amazing things with what other people throw away, with what's been deemed damaged, with what's been deemed useless, with what's been deemed purposeless. Those are the prime candidates for God to demonstrate his person, his power, to elevate them. The story and the narrative of Scripture is those who have been humbled and debased and tossed out on the side, being elevated to glorious magnitudes and being vessels for his glory. So they say if you can use anything, you can use me. If God can take something that was dead and useless and repurpose it and create life, he specializes in just that kind of thing. He speaks into the void of creation when things are out of order and there's chaos, and turns it into the miracle of creation and shapes mankind. And he's a God who does amazing things with brokenness, and I'm glad for that. And somebody else should be grateful for that as well, because if he had to have folks who had it all together, I wouldn't be able to be a vessel that he could use. If I had to understand Genesis to Revelation for God to get the glory out of my life, I would be discounted. If I had to always be easily entreated and always be smiling and happy and pleasant to people, I might be disqualified. But God can take the dysfunctional, the broken, the damaged, and do amazing things with them. He is a God who makes rivers in deserts, makes ways in the wilderness, brings fruitfulness to barrenness, and births new life amidst death and desolation. In the year 1863, a woman by the name of Emma Lazarus penned a poem entitled The New Colossus, which declared in part, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shores. Send me these homeless tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." She pens these words in reference to the Statue of Liberty as a clarion call for the opportunity afforded by the United States of America. Yet at her best, this country only affords the opportunity to do better. We see in Sarah that God provides purpose-fulfilling empowerment that destroys the shackles of time, circumstance, and birth. I would submit to you, suggest to you that the true Statue of Liberty is the cross of Christ. It is there where the shackles of the past, of what people have said are broken, of what our track record and history have been, are destroyed. And we're not just given an opportunity to be better, but we're given power to do so. There is a fountain filled with blood, drawn from Emmanuel's vein, and sinners plunged beneath that flood. lose all their guilty stain. There are occasions in our faith walk where the difference between success and failure is simply time and perspective. I want you to understand this and consider this. God did not intend Sarah to give birth to Isaac at 65 or 75 or at 85. Her barren womb would not experience the life-giving unction of God until the fullness of time, even though she carried with her divine purpose. She had a destiny. She had a plan. God had a plan for her life. There was something that was going to happen. She was going to be great in all of history. 65, 75, 80, 25 years goes by. And nothing happens. It's critical that believers not mistake the passage of time for denial of destiny. Understand that there's a difference between the clock rolling and your destiny being denied. We've talked about before the fact that some people figure if I was going to get there, I'd have been there by now. But just because time passes does not mean the purpose God has declared in your life is not going to be fulfilled. Herein we find the relevance between perspective in measuring success and failure. If you looked at this from Sarah's point of view, she had however many failed attempts at conception one might engage with over the course of 2.5 decades. She had 25 years plus however long it was before they left to try to give birth to a child. And from her perspective, she had failed at doing so for the last 25 years. I want you to, especially ladies, consider what that might feel like. What might go within the context of the course of a marriage. What it would be like to try and fail for 25 years. The doubts and the questions that might come to mind. How you can bring yourself to try it again after you've tried it so many times. Wondering, how does my spouse see me every time we try this, given the fact that it hasn't happened before? What does that say about me? What does that mean about me? And how do you find it? Let me not get ahead of myself, but what does that feel like? It feels like failure. It might look like failure. Like you said, you look in the mirror and what am I good for? I can't give my husband a legacy. I can't give this. Yeah, I love him. Yeah, I care about him. But the one thing, I got one job in this world. And I can't get that right. One thing I'm supposed to do. And I can't. What does that feel like? If she had told the story before she had Isaac, she might have said that she was a failure for the last 25 years. Yet that's not the story God was writing. His story, and consequently Sarah's history, was that of a woman who was a vessel through which all nations of the earth were blessed, and by whom the miraculous power of God was made manifest in unprecedented fashion. So the story's not over until God says it's over. It doesn't matter how many times things have gone wrong. It wasn't 25 years of failure. It just wasn't her time yet. She wasn't useless for 25 years. She had purpose. People couldn't see it. The situation in the moment couldn't see it. But God, through the hands of time, says, I got something for you. You're going to get there. Just keep trying. Keep working. Keep pressing. Endure it, because I got greatness for you. I got something magnificent promised for you. I am going to use you to change the world. Just don't give up yet. I know it might be humiliating. I know late in the night before you walk into your husband's tent, you might be looking at yourself wondering, why should I put myself through this again? Why should I deal with this one more time? Why should I go through this? Just keep going, because I got greatness for you. Don't give up on the promise of your destiny, because as long as you keep trying, I can work. But as long as you keep pushing, I can work. And it's not failure because it doesn't happen yet. It's not time. I'm not going to tell you when it's time. When I get ready in the fullness of time, when I'm ready to work, I'm going to change your entire story. It's not over till God. We're not believers. As Christians, we're not writing our own life story. And so whatever we may think of what we're going through at any given point in time is irrelevant. God is writing our story. Somebody said, mercy rewrote my life's story. if I was going to write it, if I was to sit in the corner and tell you what I thought God thought of me, there might be a pretty big gap. But God says, I know where you're headed. I know what's up the road for you. I know what you have in store. Just keep walking. And the last thing I want to pull from this, and I want us to think about, and we've touched on it, and I've been all over, there's one final aspect to this passage that can't be overlooked. To me, it's the most impressive. It's without question the most human aspect of it. In the face of all that failure, she didn't quit. And it doesn't say God gave her divine tenacity or persistence to keep going. It doesn't say God ever appeared to her and said, don't quit because I'm good. Most of the communication, all of the communication is save one little tangential incident that I'm not going to. You can go back and read the 18th chapters. Yeah, I think 18 to see that interaction. But all the communication came to Abram. God never came to encourage Sarah. God never, the angel of the Lord didn't appear to Sarah and say, keep at it, we're going to get there. None of that happened. So you have this person who finds, where do they get that from? There's a partnership that has to happen. And it might be the most incredible human struggle of the story, is that she had to find it in herself. Not to say, I'm going to just go sit in this corner and live out the rest of my days with this destiny. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep working. I have something that I know I am purposed for. There's something that I know I am designed for. There's something that I know I'm supposed to be able to do. And I'm going to keep working towards it. Even though I've got no reason to think that it's going to work. At 90, she even laughs at the idea of having a kid. That's her name, Sarah. You find in the 18th chapter when, here I go with it, you find in the 18th chapter when she overhears the angel of the Lord tell Abram that Sarah's going to have a kid. She sits there and laughs at the idea because it's ridiculous to her. But she keeps going back to Abram. Somewhere there had to be, I'm not giving up on my duty as a spouse. I'm not walking away from this relationship. And that was Sarah. We don't see where that was God. Maybe I would suggest, and this is my own choice or choice of interpretation, that it was the image of God manifesting itself through her. Everybody is created in the image of God. Sometimes we don't always recognize what that is. But that thing that keeps you going and keeps pushing you towards destiny, that won't let you be satisfied, settling with something else, that keeps gnawing away at you, even though sometimes you sit on it and try to ignore it, that thing that keeps telling you that there's greater for you and keeps pushing you to act in ways, and maybe that is God's indomitable will nudging you towards something. And maybe that's what the image of God in humanity manifesting itself is what drove Sarah. We can't really say, but I don't want you to ignore the fact that while God worked a miracle, Sarah kept herself in position to receive the miracle. Because had she stopped, no baby's coming. So I wanted you to understand and take some time to reframe the miracle of the birth of Isaac. We understand that you see God doing something magnificent, and there's this miracle child, but there's a miracle mother here too that sometimes gets overlooked. What her struggle was, what her story was, and how great what God did in her life was. Questions or comments?